The doors of the Grand Assembly Hall opened with a sound like thunder rolling across mountains. Ambassador David Cole stood at the entrance, his heart pounding against his ribs as he looked upon a sight no human had ever witnessed before. The chamber stretched before him like the inside of a living planet. Crystalline walls rose 300 meters high, covered with viewing platforms where thousands of alien beings watched in absolute silence. Lights from distant stars filtered through transparent ceiling panels, casting everything in colors that human eyes struggled to name. The air itself hummed with energy, with power, with the weight of 10,000 years of galactic civilization. David was alone. The rest of the human delegation had been stopped at the outer gates. Only the accused was permitted to approach the Council of Supreme Judgment. Only the one who would answer for his species could walk the path of reckoning. He took his first step forward. The floor beneath his feet was made of some material that absorbed sound, making his footsteps silent even to his own ears. Around him, arranged in ascending circles that seemed to go on forever, sat the representatives of 800 civilized worlds. Some had bodies like twisted metal. Others floated in tanks of strange liquids. A few were simply clouds of light that pulsed with each thought. All of them were watching him. David walked for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The central platform waited at the heart of the chamber, a raised disk of white stone surrounded by empty air. When he reached it, he had to cross a bridge no wider than his shoulders, with nothing below but a drop into darkness. He did not hesitate. He could not afford to show fear. The platform felt solid beneath his feet. He turned to face the highest tier, where 5 massive thrones held the beings who ruled over all known space. The Supreme Arbiters. The first was a creature of living crystal, its body reflecting and refracting light in patterns that seemed to contain meaning. The second resembled a giant insect, but with eyes that held ancient wisdom instead of simple hunger. The third was humanoid in shape, but stood 4 meters tall, with skin the color of storms and eyes like burning stars. The fourth existed as a swirling cloud contained within a force field, constantly shifting and reforming. The fifth was the strangest of all, a being that seemed to exist in multiple places at once, its form flickering between solid and transparent. It was the crystal being who spoke first. The voice came not from any mouth, but from everywhere at once, translated instantly into words David could understand. Human, you stand before the Council of Supreme Judgment. Your species has been accused of crimes against galactic order. You will answer for these crimes. You will accept the judgment of this council. You will submit to whatever punishment we determine is just. David drew a breath. 3 months ago, he had been a history professor at a small university in Colorado. 3 months ago, humanity had still believed it was alone in the universe. 3 months ago, everything had been different. Now he stood at the center of galactic power, the only voice Earth had to speak in its defense. I am ready to answer, he said. His voice was steady. He was proud of that. The insectoid arbiter leaned forward. Its mandibles clicked in a pattern that the translation systems rendered as contempt. Humanity has violated the emergence protocols. Your species developed faster than light travel, without permission. You explored restricted sectors. You made contact with forbidden civilizations. You have disrupted the careful balance we have maintained for millennia. We did not know these protocols existed. David replied, Ignorance is not a defense. The storm-skinned arbiter thundered. The protocols exist whether you know them or not. The law applies to all species, aware or unaware. David nodded slowly. I understand, but I must ask a question before we proceed. The cloud being pulsed with what might have been irritation. You are not here to ask questions. You are here to answer them. Nevertheless, David pressed on, I believe this question is relevant to my defense. May I ask it? The 5 arbiters exchanged glances. The flickering being spoke for the first time, its voice coming from multiple directions at once. Ask your question, human, but know that it will not change our judgment. David reached into his jacket pocket. Every being in the chamber tensed. Guards materialized from hidden positions, weapons raised. But David only pulled out a small data crystal, holding it up where all could see. 6 weeks ago, a human research vessel called the Wanderer discovered something in the void between sectors. A region your charts mark as empty, uninhabited, forbidden to all exploration. He paused, letting the tension build. The Wanderer found a planet there. A planet that should not exist. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The arbiters remained still, but David noticed the crystal being's light patterns had changed, becoming more complex, more rapid. This planet, David continued, contained records. Very old records. Records that tell a story quite different from the one this council has been telling the galaxy for 10,000 years. The storm-skinned arbiter rose from his throne. You will surrender that data crystal immediately. Whatever information it contains is classified at the highest level. Classified because it is dangerous? David asked. Or classified because it is true? The chamber erupted. Beings on every level were shouting, gesturing, demanding order. The arbiters were on their feet, their composure cracking for the first time, and perhaps centuries. David stood in the center of the chaos, holding a crystal that contained secrets old enough to shake the foundations of galactic civilization. And he smiled, because this was exactly what he had planned. The data on the crystal told the story of the first races, the civilizations that had existed before the current council rose to power. It told how those races had been destroyed, not by war or natural disaster, but by deliberate extinction at the hands of the very beings who now sat in judgment over the galaxy. The council had built its authority on lies. And humanity, the youngest and weakest species in known space, had stumbled upon the truth. Now David had to use that truth to save his world. Because the council could not allow this secret to spread. They would do anything, sacrifice anything, to keep their crimes buried, including destroying every human being alive. The storm-skinned arbiter raised a hand, and silence fell instantly. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried to every corner of the vast chamber. Human, you have made a grave mistake. Whatever you think you have discovered, whatever you believe you know, it will not save you. It will only make your species' punishment more severe. David met the arbiter's burning gaze without flinching. Perhaps, but I think you will want to hear what I have to say before you make any decisions. Because what I discovered affects not just Earth, but every world represented in this chamber. He looked out at the thousands of alien faces watching you. The council has been lying to all of you, and I can prove it. The silence that followed was absolute. 800 civilizations waited to hear what the human would say next. David Cole took a deep breath and began to tell the truth. The Grand Assembly Hall had never known such silence. 800 species, thousands of representatives, all frozen in place as the human held up a data crystal that contained the power to destroy everything they believed. David Cole began speaking, and his words carried to every corner of the chamber. 12,000 years ago, the galaxy was not ruled by this council. It was guided by a collective of races called the Founders. They did not seek power or control. They sought to help younger species reach the stars, to share knowledge, to build a civilization based on cooperation rather than fear. The Crystal Arbiter's light patterns had become almost frantic. This is fabrication. Historical revisionism designed to undermine legitimate authority. Is it? David gestured, and the data crystal projected images into the air above the central platform. Ancient recordings recovered from ruins that predated any current civilization. They showed worlds of breathtaking beauty, cities that seemed to grow from the land itself, beings of 100 different forms working together in harmony. The founders built the first jump gates. They mapped the galaxy. They established the protocols for peaceful contact between species. David's voice grew harder. And then, approximately 12,000 years ago, they were exterminated. Every world, every colony, every individual. Billions of lives erased from existence. Lies, the insect arbiter hissed. The records show who was responsible, David continued, ignoring the interruption. The images shifted to show battle scenes, destruction on a scale that made the assembled representatives gasp. A coalition of 5 species, younger races that the founders had uplifted and trusted. These 5 decided they wanted to rule rather than serve. They wanted the galaxy for themselves. He looked directly at the 5 supreme arbiters. Your ancestors, the founders of your precious council. The chamber exploded into chaos. Representatives were on their feet, shouting in dozens of law. Engages. Some demanded proof. Others called for David's immediate execution. A few scattered throughout the assembly, sat in stunned silence, their expressions suggesting they had always suspected something like this. The storm-skinned arbiter raised both hands. An energy crackled across the chamber, forcing silence. Even if these records were genuine, they prove nothing. History is written by survivors. The founders were dangerous, their methods unsustainable. We did what was necessary to protect the galaxy from their misguided idealism. You murdered billions, David said flatly. We saved the galaxy from chaos. The arbiter's voice held no shame, no regret. The founders would have allowed any species to develop any technology, to expand without limits, to wage wars without consequences. We established order. We created protocols that have maintained peace for 12,000 years. Peace maintained through deception and control, David countered. You restrict technology to keep other species weak. You forbid exploration of certain sectors to hide the evidence of your crimes. You claim to be impartial judges when you are actually tyrants who stole power through genocide. The flickering arbiter spoke, its multiple voices creating an unsettling harmony. Human, you have revealed information that was meant to remain buried. But what do you hope to accomplish? Even if every being in this chamber believes you, it changes nothing. We hold the power. We control the jump gates, the military forces, the technological infrastructure that civilization depends upon. Truth without power is merely noise. David smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. I was hoping you would say something like that. He reached into his jacket again. This time, the guards did not react. They had learned that the human was not armed in any conventional sense. What he pulled out was a small communication device. While you were bringing me here for judgment, while you were so confident in your superiority, humanity was not sitting idle. We are a young species, yes, weak by your standards. But we have one advantage you never anticipated. He activated the device. Across the galaxy, in 57 different systems, similar devices activated in response. We make friends. The chamber's displays flickered and changed. Instead of showing the usual status reports and procedural information, they now showed images from worlds scattered across known space. Human ships, yes, but also vessels from dozens of other species. Fleet formations that should not exist. Alliances that the Council had never authorized. When we discovered the truth about the founders, we did not keep it to ourselves, David explained. We shared it with the Meridian Collective, whose ancestors were among the founders' first students, with the Void Wanderers, who have preserved oral histories of a time before the Council, with the Deep Miners, who found similar records in ancient asteroid bases, with every species willing to listen. The Cloud Arbiter's form was churning violently. You have violated every treaty, every protocol, every law that governs interstellar relations. Your laws, David replied. Laws designed to keep other species isolated and weak. Laws that forbid the kind of cooperation that might threaten your power. He shook his head. We are not going to follow your laws anymore. The storm-skinned arbiter stepped forward, energy gathering around his massive form. Then you will die. All of you. Every human, every species foolish enough to side with you. We will burn your worlds to ash and scatter the remains across the void. You could try, David acknowledged. You certainly have the firepower. But I think you will find the cost higher than you expect. He gestured at the displays. Those fleets you are seeing? They are not positioned randomly. They are stationed at key jump gate nexuses throughout the galaxy. If you attack Earth, they will destroy those nexuses. Your entire transportation network will collapse. It might take you centuries to rebuild. Centuries during which the species you have oppressed will have time to develop their own technologies, to build their own alliances, to prepare for war. The Crystal Arbiter's patterns had slowed, becoming more deliberate. It was calculating, David realized, running scenarios, trying to find a way out. Additionally, David continued, the information we discovered has been copied and distributed to secure locations across the galaxy. If Earth falls, if our allies fall, that information will be released to every species in known space. Your secrets will be exposed regardless of what you do to us. You are bluffing, the insect arbiter chittered. You cannot have organized all of this in 3 months. We did not organize it, David said. We simply provided the truth. The alliances formed themselves, species who had suspected for centuries that something was wrong, who had chafed under restrictions that made no sense, who had wondered why exploration was forbidden and questions were discouraged. We gave them proof of what they already felt. The rest happened naturally. He spread his hands. So here's the situation, Supreme Arbiters. You can destroy Earth and our allies, but the cost will be the collapse of your transportation network and the exposure of your crimes to the entire galaxy. Or you can negotiate. The storm-skinned arbiter laughed. It was an ugly sound, filled with contempt. Negotiate? With humans? You are insects demanding concessions from gods. We are insects with gods trapped in a web, David replied calmly. And we are offering you a way out that does not involve mutual destruction. The 5 arbiters looked at each other. For the first time in recorded history, the Supreme Council was uncertain. David let the moment stretch. Then he spoke again, his voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. Here is what humanity proposes. Full disclosure of the true history of galactic civilization. End of technological restrictions on developing species. Democratization of the Council, with real representation for all member worlds. Amnesty for past crimes, provided your species commit to peaceful participation. In the new order, you want us to surrender. Everything we have built, the flickering arbiter said. I want you to. Stop being tyrants and start being partners, David corrected. The choice is yours, but choose quickly. Because right now, across the galaxy, billions of beings are watching this conversation. They are seeing their rulers for what they really are, and they are deciding what they want to do about it. The displays shifted again, showing not fleets, but crowds. Demonstrations on dozens of worlds. Species that had never openly defied the Council, now filling their streets and public spaces. Not violent, not yet. Just present. Just watching. Just waiting to see what happened next. The galaxy is waking up, David said quietly. You can fight that awakening and probably destroy yourselves along with us. Or you can accept that 12,000 years is long enough for any empire and help build something better. The storm-skinned arbiter sat back down slowly. The other four followed. They were silent for a long moment, communicating in ways that did not require words. Finally, the Crystal Arbiter spoke. Its patterns were slow now, almost mournful. "We will consider your proposal human. But know this. Whatever we decide, the galaxy will never be the same. You have broken something that cannot be repaired." David nodded. That was the idea. He looked out at the thousands of watching representatives, at the billions more watching through broadcast systems across known space. "Everything changes," he said. "The only question is whether we change together or tear each other apart." The council chamber fell into a heavy silence. The oldest powers in the galaxy were facing something they had never encountered before, a choice they could not avoid, and a species that refused to be. Afraid, the supreme arbiters withdrew to their private chambers. The galaxy waited. 3 days passed with no announcement, no decision, nothing but silence from the highest authorities in known space. David Cole remained on the council station, technically a guest, but practically a prisoner. His quarters were comfortable, his needs met, but armed guards stood outside his door at all hours. The message was clear. Humanity had won a battle, not the war. On the morning of the 4th day, everything changed. David was eating breakfast when alarms began screaming throughout the station. Red lights flashed in corridors that had known nothing but peace for centuries. Through his window, he could see massive warships emerging from jump space, more ships than he had ever seen gathered in one place. A guard burst into his quarters. Unlike the others who had watched him with contempt, this one looked terrified. "Ambassador, you need to come with me, now." "What is happening?" "The arbiters have made their decision." David followed the guard through corridors filled with running officials and panicked staff. They reached a command center where massive displays showed the tactical situation unfolding around them. A storm-skinned arbiter species, the Voltheri, had mobilized their entire military fleet. 3,000 warships surrounded the council station, their weapons charged and ready. Additional fleets were jumping to systems throughout the galaxy, positioning themselves at strategic points. "The Voltheri have declared martial law," the guard explained, his voice shaking. "They are seizing control of all council functions. The other 4 arbiter species are being detained." David's blood ran cold. "They are staging a coup. They are ensuring the survival of proper order." This voice came from behind them. David turned to find a Voltheri officer entering the command center, a dozen armed soldiers at his back. "Ambassador Cole, you are to be transported to the Voltheri home world for trial. Your species has been declared a threat to galactic stability. Earth is being blockaded. Your allied fleets are surrounded." "This is insane," David said. "You cannot fight the entire galaxy." The officer smiled. It was not a pleasant expression on a face built for intimidation. "We do not need to fight the entire galaxy. We only need to demonstrate what happens to those who challenge legitimate authority. When Earth burns, when your allies are crushed, the galaxy will remember its place." Before David could respond, explosions rocked the station. The tactical displays showed new ships appearing, vessels that were not part of any council fleet. "What is that?" the Voltheri officer demanded. A technician's voice came through, trembling with shock. "Sir, it is the Meridian Collective. They have brought their deep space fleet out of hiding, and the Void Wanderers, and the Deep Miners, and... Sir, I'm counting at least 40 different species. They are engaging our forces." David felt hope surge through him. Your martial law forgot one thing. Those fleets I mentioned, they were not bluffing, and they are not going to let you destroy Earth. The battle that followed would later be called the Awakening. It lasted for 18 hours and changed the galaxy forever. The Voltheri had counted on their military superiority. For 12,000 years, they had maintained the largest and most advanced fleet in known space. No single species could challenge them. No alliance had ever dared to form against them, but humanity had done something the Council never expected. They had shared not just information, but technology. The discoveries from the Founder ruins included weapon systems, shield configurations, and jump drive designs that had been lost for millennia. The allied species had spent months integrating these advances into their fleets. The Volturi warships found themselves facing opponents who could match them shot for shot. David watched the battle unfold from the command center, which the Allied forces had secured within the first 2 hours. The Volturi officer who had threatened him was now in custody, along with most of the station's original command staff. Commander Elena Vasquez, who led the human contingent of the Allied fleet, appeared on screen. Her face was tired, but triumphant. "Ambassador, we have broken the blockade around Earth. The Volturi home fleet is in retreat. Their forces throughout the galaxy are surrendering or being neutralized." "Casualties?" David asked, dreading the answer. "Heavy, on both sides. But the Volturi military is no longer a unified force. Their civilian government has declared the Supreme Arbiter and his war faction as criminals. They are asking for terms." David closed his eyes briefly. People had died because he had started this. Beings of dozens of species, fighting a war they should never have had to fight. But the alternative would have been worse. The Volturi had been planning to exterminate humanity, to make an example that would keep the galaxy in chains for another 12,000 years. Sometimes the only choice was between bad options. "What about the other Arbiter species?" he asked. "The crystal beings, the Luminari, are requesting immediate negotiations. They claim they opposed the Volturi decision from the start. The insectoids, the Kyrix, have withdrawn to their home systems and declared neutrality. The cloud beings and the flickering ones." Elena paused, checking reports. "They are gone, Ambassador. They evacuated their representatives before the battle and have not been heard from since." "Gone where?" "Unknown. But they took a lot of data with them. Our intelligence thinks they are planning to regroup, to wait for a better opportunity." David nodded slowly. The victory was real, but it was not complete. 2 of the 5 ruling species had escaped, taking their knowledge and their grudges with them. They would be back eventually, one way or another, but that was a problem for the future. Right now, the galaxy needed something else. "Commander, I need transport to the main council chamber. It is time to start building something new." The chamber was damaged from the fighting. Scorch marks covered the crystalline walls. Several viewing platforms had collapsed. But the central platform still stood, and representatives from hundreds of worlds were gathering, either in person or via holographic link. David walked the path of reckoning for the second time. This time, he was not alone. Representatives from the Meridian Collective, the Void Wanderers, the Deep Miners, and 30 other species walked with him. When they reached the platform, they stood together, facing the assembled galaxy. "The old order is broken," David began, his voice carrying through translation systems to every corner of the chamber. "For 12,000 years, this council told you what to believe, what to develop, where to explore. For 12,000 years, secrets were kept and truths were buried. That ends today." A Meridian representative stepped forward. Her species resembled tall, graceful beings of living silver, their forms shifting constantly like mercury in motion. "We propose a new structure. Not a council of supreme rulers, but an assembly of equals. Every species with one voice. Decisions made through consensus, not decree. There will be chaos," someone shouted from the upper tiers. "Without central authority, the galaxy will tear itself apart." David shook his head. "The galaxy has been tearing itself apart under central authority. You just could not see it because the wounds were hidden. The chaos you fear is already happening. In species suppressed and controlled, in potential never realized, in civilizations that were destroyed before they could threaten the existing order. A deep miner spoke next. His species lived in the hearts of asteroids, beings of rock and mineral that communicated through vibrations. The translation systems rendered his words slowly, giving them weight. Freedom is frightening. We understand this. For our entire history, we have been told what we could mine, where we could expand, how we could develop. But fear of freedom is not wisdom. It is slavery accepted. David looked out at the thousands of watching faces. We are not asking you to trust us. We are asking you to trust yourselves. To believe that your species, your civilizations, your people are capable of making their own decisions without masters guiding every step. What about the Voltheri? Another voice called out. What about the species who supported the old order? Will they be punished? Excluded? This was the question David had been dreading. The anger in the chamber was real. Species who had suffered under council restrictions wanted justice, wanted revenge, wanted the Voltheri and their allies to pay for 12,000 years of oppression. But vengeance would only create new cycles of violence. The Voltheri people are not our enemies, David said carefully. Their military leadership chose to fight rather than accept change. They have been defeated. Their war faction has been arrested by their own civilian government. But the Voltheri species deserves the same opportunity as everyone else to participate in whatever comes next. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Not everyone agreed, but the representatives standing with David on the platform nodded their support. We propose amnesty, the Meridian representative said, for past actions taken under the old system. We cannot build a new future if we are constantly fighting old battles. Justice, yes, for specific crimes against specific peoples, but not collective punishment, not species-wide retribution. This is weakness, someone shouted. They will see mercy as invitation to strike again. David raised his hand. Maybe, but strength built on cruelty is not really strength. It is just fear wearing a different face. If we become what we fought against, we have not won anything. The debate continued for hours. Representatives argued, proposed, compromised. It was messy and frustrating and slow. Everything the old council had been designed to prevent, but it was also real. For the first time in 12,000 years, the voices of the galaxy were being heard, all of them, not just the ones with power dot by the end of the day. They had the framework for a new galactic assembly. Equal representation. Transparent governance. No restricted technologies. No forbidden sectors. No secrets kept for the supposed good of lesser species. It would take years to fully implement. Maybe decades. There would be setbacks and conflicts and moments when everything seemed about to fall apart. But as David, Cole stood on the platform where he had once been judged, surrounded by beings from across the galaxy who had chosen hope over fear, he felt something he had not expected. Pride, not in himself, but in what so many different species could accomplish when they worked together. The galaxy had been told for 12,000 years that it needed masters. Today, it had proven that lie wrong. Tomorrow, it would start learning how to walk free. 6 months after the awakening, the galaxy learned that victory was only the beginning. David Cole stood in the operations center of New Hope Station, the temporary headquarters of the Galactic Assembly. Through reinforced windows, he could see construction ships building permanent structures, vessels from 100 different species working side by side. It should have been a scene of triumph. Instead, his face was grim as he studied the reports flooding across his displays. 3 more systems have declared independence from the assembly, Commander Vasquez reported. She looked as tired as David felt. Neither of them had slept properly in weeks. The Tralloc Dominion is refusing to honor trade agreements. The Shattered Isles Coalition has started building military installations near Meridian Space. And the refugee situation? David asked. Getting worse. The Voltheri exodus continues. Millions of their people are fleeing worlds where they used to be rulers. Some host populations are accepting them. Others. Elena paused. There have been incidents. Violent ones. David closed his eyes. This was what the old council had always warned about. Without central authority, without the iron hand of the supreme arbiters, the galaxy was fragmenting. Old grudges were surfacing. New conflicts were emerging. He had helped break the chains. Now he had to figure out how to prevent the freed prisoners from killing each other. Ambassador. A young officer approached, her expression urgent. Priority communication from the Luminari delegation. The crystal beings had become humanity's closest allies in the new assembly. Their representative, a being called Prism, whose light patterns David had learned to read, appeared on the main display. Ambassador Cole, we have received disturbing intelligence. The two arbiter species who fled during the awakening, the Vorath and the Shimmer, have been located. Where? Beyond the outer reaches. In territory we believed was uninhabited. Prism's patterns shifted to display a star map. A cluster of systems blinked with warning markers. They have been building Ambassador. For 6 months, while we struggled to hold the assembly together, they have been constructing a military installation, unlike anything we have seen before. The images that followed made David's blood run cold. The installation was not simply a base. It was a weapon. A structure spanning 3 star systems, connected by energy conduits that pulsed with power drawn from the stars themselves. At its heart sat a device that sensor readings could barely interpret, something that warped space around it in ways that should have been impossible. What is it? Elena asked. We believe it is based on founder technology, Prism replied. Designs that were hidden even from the other arbiter species. The Vorath and Shimmer kept secrets from their own council, waiting for a moment when they might need them. David studied the readings. What can it do? Our analysts believe it can generate a cascade failure in jump space. If activated, it would destroy every jump gate in the galaxy simultaneously. Prism's patterns dimmed with what David recognized as horror. Without jump gates, interstellar civilization collapses. Ships would take centuries to travel between stars. Every world would be isolated, cut off from trade, from aid, from any hope of cooperation. That would kill billions, Elena said. Maybe trillions. Worlds that depend on imported food, medicine, technology, ... The Vorath and Shimmer do not care about casualties, Prism said. They care about power. If they destroy the jump network, they will have the only functioning transportation system in the galaxy. The technology they fled with, combined with founder designs, allows them to build isolated jump points. They could travel freely while everyone else is trapped. David felt the weight of the situation crushing down on him. This was not a political problem, not a diplomatic challenge. This was an extinction-level threat. How long until they can activate it? Our estimates suggest 3 weeks. Perhaps 4. And our military options? Prism's light dimmed further. The installation is heavily defended. Any conventional assault would result in massive casualties, and we cannot guarantee success. The weapon might be activated before we could disable it. David turned away from the display, walking to the window where construction ships continued their peaceful work. Those ships, those workers, all the beings across the galaxy who were struggling to build a new future. They had no idea that their future might be measured in weeks. There has to be another way, he said quietly. Elena moved to stand beside him. The assembly military could muster a significant force if we had more time. But 3 weeks is not enough to coordinate the kind of assault we would need. And even if we succeeded, the Vorith and Shimmer would escape. They would try again, somewhere else, some other way. David shook his head. We need to end this permanently. Not just stop the weapon, but remove the threat entirely. You sound like you have an idea. David turned back to face the displays. The Vorith and Shimmer fled because they could not accept a galaxy where they were not in control. They would rather destroy everything than share power with species they consider inferior. So we need to show them that control is impossible, that even if they succeed, they will have nothing to rule. David looked at Prism's holographic image. The founders built more than weapons. They built systems for sharing information, for connecting civilizations. You said some of those systems were in the data we recovered? Yes, communication networks that operate independently of jump gates. The technology was suppressed by the Council because it would have made central control impossible. Information could flow freely, without monitoring or censorship. Can we build it? Deploy it? Prism's patterns shifted rapidly, calculating. With full cooperation from assembly members. Using the manufacturing capacity available to us. Yes. It would take approximately 2 weeks. Then we do both. David turned to Elena. We prepare a military assault on the installation. Make it obvious. Let the Vorith and Shimmer see our fleets gathering. Let them believe we are coming for them with conventional force, while actually deploying the Founder communication network throughout the galaxy. By the time they realize what we have done, it will be too late. Even if they destroy the jump gates, even if they isolate every world, the network will let civilizations coordinate, share resources, help each other survive. Elena frowned. That does not stop them from activating the weapon. No, but it removes their reason for doing so. If they cannot rule over isolated, desperate worlds, what is the point? They would destroy the galaxy for nothing. You are assuming they will be rational about this. I am assuming they are not insane. They fled and hid and built their weapon because they wanted power, not because they wanted destruction for its own sake. If we take away the prize they are fighting for, they have to reconsider. Prism's patterns shifted to something David interpreted as skepticism. Ambassador, this plan relies on beings who have shown themselves willing to commit genocide, reconsidering their choices. It also gives them a way out, David replied. Right now, they see 2 options. Win everything or lose everything. We give them a 3rd option. Join the galaxy they cannot control, or watch the galaxy survive without them. And if they choose destruction anyway? David's expression hardened. Then our military assault becomes real instead of a distraction. But we try the peaceful option first. That is who we are. That is what makes us different from the old council. The next 2 weeks were the most intense of David's life. Assembly manufacturing worlds worked around the clock, producing communication relay satellites by the thousands. Human engineers collaborated with luminary scientists, meridian technicians, deep miner fabricators. The logistics alone would have been impossible under the old council, with its restrictions and approvals and endless bureaucracy. The new assembly was messy and chaotic and frequently frustrating. But it was also capable of mobilizing on a scale the galaxy had never seen when the cause was right. Meanwhile, military forces gathered at staging points throughout the galaxy. The Vorith and Shimmer watched through long-range sensors, seeing exactly what David wanted them to see. A massive conventional assault taking shape. What they did not see were the small, fast ships deploying relay satellites in every star system they passed through. On the 18th day, David received word that the network was active. Across the galaxy, beings who had never communicated directly could now reach each other in seconds, regardless of distance or location. He activated a channel that had never existed before. a direct link to the Vorath and Shimmer installation. The faces that appeared on screen were strange even by galactic standards. The Vorath existed as swirling darkness contained in shapes that suggested bodies, but never quite solidified. The Shimmer were fragments of light that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Ambassador Cole, the Vorath speaker said. Its voice was like whispers from empty rooms. We wondered when you would call. You know why I'm reaching out. You wish to threaten us, to demand we surrender, to pretend that your pathetic alliance can stand against powers beyond your comprehension. I am calling to give you a choice. David leaned forward, one you did not have before. He explained what the assembly had done. The communication network, the ability of civilizations to coordinate even without jump gates, the removal of isolation as a weapon. The Vorath listened in silence. The Shimmer fragmented and reformed in patterns that might have indicated thought. When David finished, the Vorath spoke again. You believe this changes anything? Even with your network, the destruction of interstellar transport will cripple civilization. Billions will still die, and we will still be the only power capable of travel. But for what? David asked. What will you rule? A galaxy that hates you, that coordinates against you, that will never stop fighting until you are destroyed? You cannot occupy every world. You cannot monitor every communication. You will spend eternity as tyrants hunted by the very beings you claim to rule. Better to rule in hell than serve in heaven, the Vorath replied. Is it? Because from where I am standing, it looks like you will not rule in hell. You will just die there, slowly, surrounded by enemies who will never forgive what you have done. David paused, letting that sink in. Or you can accept that the galaxy has changed, that control is no longer possible, that your choice is not between ruling and serving, but between joining and being left behind. The Shimmer spoke for the first time, its voice like bells heard from very far away. You ask us to surrender everything we built. I ask you to build something new, something better. David's voice softened. The old ways are gone. The council is broken. We are making something different now, something where power is not concentrated in the hands of a few. You can be part of that, or you can die fighting against something you cannot stop. The channel went silent. The Vorath and Shimmer conferred in ways David could not perceive. Then the Vorath spoke again. We will consider your words, Ambassador. But know this, if we decide to activate our weapon, all your networks and alliances will not save you. The channel closed. David sat back, exhausted. He had done everything he could. Now all that remained was waiting to see if beings, who had schemed for 12,000 years, could learn to choose a different path. The waiting lasted 72 hours. 72 hours during which David Cole barely slept, barely ate, barely did anything except watch displays that showed no change in the Vorath and Shimmer. Installation.assembly forces remained at their staging points. The communication network hummed with nervous traffic as billions of beings across the galaxy waited to learn whether they would live or die. On the morning of the fourth day, everything changed. David was in the operations center when alarms began sounding. Not attack warnings. Something else. Ambassador, an officer called out, her voice strange with disbelief. The installation. It is powering down. David rushed to her station. The readings were unmistakable. The massive energy conduits connecting the 3-star systems were dimming. The weapon at the heart of the installation was going dormant. Is it a malfunction? A trap? Negative, sir? We are receiving a transmission from the Vorath directly. The swirling darkness of the Vorath speaker appeared on the main display. Its voice was different now. Still cold, still alien, but without the contempt it had carried before. Ambassador Cole, we have considered your words. We have debated among ourselves for 3 days and 3 nights. The darkness shifted in patterns that might have meant resignation. We have decided that you are correct. David felt his knees go weak. He gripped the edge of a console to stay standing. The weapon will be dismantled. Our forces will stand down. We request formal negotiations with the Galactic Assembly to discuss our integration into the new order. Why? David managed to ask. You could have destroyed everything. You chose not to. Why? The Vorath was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice carried something David had never expected to hear from beings who had schemed for 12,000 years. Weariness. We fled because we believed the old ways could be restored. That with enough power, we could force the galaxy back into the patterns we understood. We built our weapon because we thought destruction was preferable to a universe we could not control. The darkness shifted again. But you showed us something we had not considered. Not defeat. Not overwhelming force. You showed us that even total victory would give us nothing worth having. A galaxy united against us. An eternity of fighting for scraps of power that would never satisfy. Ruling over ashes and hatred. David nodded slowly. And that was not what you wanted. We wanted order, control, certainty. We told ourselves it was for the good of the galaxy, but the truth was simpler. We were afraid. Afraid of change, of uncertainty, of a universe where our place was not guaranteed. Everyone is afraid of that, David said quietly. The difference is what you do with the fear. You build networks that connect strangers. You offer choices to enemies. You risk your own destruction on the chance that beings who have harmed you might choose differently. The Vorath paused. We have never encountered a species that behaves as humanity does. It is ... confusing. Despite everything, David almost smiled. Welcome to dealing with humans. The negotiations that followed took 3 months. The Vorath and Shimmer had conditions, concerns, fears that needed to be addressed. The Assembly had demands of its own, guarantees that the weapon technology would be destroyed, that the Vorath and Shimmer would submit to the same rules as everyone else. It was difficult. There were moments when everything nearly fell apart, when old suspicions threatened to overwhelm new possibilities. But in the end, an agreement was reached. The Vorath and Shimmer joined the Galactic Assembly. Not as rulers, not as privileged powers, but as equal members alongside the species they had once considered inferior. Their technology was shared freely. Their secrets were disclosed. In exchange, they received what they had never had under the old council: genuine acceptance. Not fear masquerading as respect, but the real thing. David Cole stood in the Grand Assembly Hall 1 year after the awakening. The chamber had been rebuilt, its crystalline walls restored, its viewing platforms reconstructed. But it looked different now. The 5 massive thrones where the supreme arbiters had sat were gone, replaced by a circular arrangement where representatives from hundreds of species sat as equals. He was not speaking. He was listening as a Volturi diplomat addressed the assembly. The reconstruction of the outer colonies is proceeding well. Volturi engineers are working alongside Meridian architects and human construction crews. We expect full habitability within 6 months. The diplomat paused. This cooperation would have been impossible under the old council. We were kept separate, suspicious, afraid of each other. Now we are building together. Murmurs of approval rippled through the chamber. Not universal agreement. There were still tensions, still old wounds that had not healed, still conflicts that flared up and required patient resolution. But there was also hope. Real hope, for the first time in 12,000 years. After the session ended, David walked through corridors where beings of 100 different forms moved freely, working together, arguing together, living together. He found a quiet observation deck where he could look out at the stars. Prism joined him. The luminary's light patterns soft and contemplative. "You are troubled." "Ambassador." David shook his head slowly. "Not troubled, just thinking." "About what?" "About how close we came. How easily everything could have gone wrong. One different decision, one moment of fear or anger, and the galaxy would be ashes." He paused. "And about how much work there still is to do." "There will always be more work," Prism observed. "That is what it means to build something that lives. It requires constant care, constant attention. The moment you believe you are finished is the moment decay begins. Is that supposed to be comforting?" Prism's patterns shifted in what David had learned was laughter. "It is supposed to be honest. The galaxy was stagnant for 12,000 years because the Council believed it had found the final answer, the perfect system that needed no improvement. You and your species showed us that there are no final answers, only better questions." David looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships were exploring regions that had been forbidden for millennia. Somewhere, Volturi teachers were sharing their knowledge with species they had once ruled over. Somewhere, Varith and Shimmer scientists were collaborating with researchers from across the galaxy on projects that would have been impossible under the old order. The galaxy was not perfect. It would never be perfect. There would be conflicts, mistakes, moments when the whole fragile structure threatened to collapse. But it was free. Free to grow, to change, to become something better than anyone had imagined. "The old council thought they had triumphed," David said quietly. "They thought their system would last forever. They believed nothing could challenge their power. And they were wrong," Prism completed. "They were wrong because they forgot something important." David turned to face his friend. "They forgot that the universe is bigger than any empire. That truth is stronger than any lie. That the desire for freedom never dies, no matter how long it is suppressed." He looked back at the stars. "The galaxy called for help, and we answered. Not because we were the strongest or the wisest, but because we were willing to try. To risk everything on the chance that things could be different. And now?" Prism asked. David smiled. It was a tired smile, but a real one. "Now we do what humans have always do. We keep going. We face the next challenge, solve the next problem, build the next bridge. Not because we know we will succeed, but because the trying itself matters." The stars burned on, indifferent and eternal. But among them, a young species and its allies were proving that even the smallest lights could push back the darkness. The old powers had thought. They had triumphed. They had been wrong. And when the galaxy called for help, humanity had answered. That was the beginning of a new age. Not an ending, but a beginning. A story that would continue as long as there were beings willing to hope, to struggle, to reach for something better. David Cole turned away from the window and walked back into the corridors of the assembly. Ready for whatever came next, the galaxy was waiting, and he had work to do.